and welcome to Culture of Caring. I'm your host, Natalie Boyle, and really excited to share our guest with you this week. So as we've been talking about values, and one of the values that is really important at Mommies in Need is we say that we want to be extraordinary. And what that means in our culture is that we are never satisfied with good enough. We lovingly push ourselves and each other towards our potential, and we choose to go the extra mile even when the last mile was hard. And one of the people who is just exemplary of this value is our Chief of Staff and Operations, Laura Newell Roden. So that's new to say because Laura just got married a couple weeks ago. Congratulations, Laura.
Thank you.
It was actually my first chance getting to officiate a wedding.
Which you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. It was a blast. I loved it. So I am available for weddings now. If you need someone, I am ordained by an online company church. So please feel free, reach out if you want to host for your wedding.
That's right.
It's a host for the wedding. Anyway, but Laura, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah.
And we have done a lot of work together over the last 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So Laura started about 3.5 years ago, and she is one of the people that when we first started Mommies in Need and we were adding staff members, we weren't big enough to add full-time staff members.
Right.
And so there are a couple of people who've been here since the early days that were a part of what I say is I kind of brought them in sneakily, and then all of a sudden they had a full-time job. So Laura started off, I think, at like 5 hours a week or something like that. And very quickly we just kept growing, and we kept being like, how about 20 hours a week? How about 30 hours a week? Okay, now you're full-time. Yes. And now she's our Chief of Staff and Operations. And one of the things that I was really excited to bring you on, Laura, is because you and I've done a lot of work of really building this culture of caring.
Yes.
And of saying that as a company, we are going to say that, HR is vital.
Yes.
And it's something that we really care passionately about.
Right.
And so I'd love just to hear from your perspective, kind of what it's been like, if you want to share a little bit of your background, but then also kind of how things are different and how we are extraordinary in our HR practices.
Yes, and I think this starts way back from when you were talking about I worked about 5 hours a week. And it was really, working for you for the first time, that was my first introduction to nonprofit world. And it was so interesting to me to be able to look at HR in a different way with you, because we'd look at each other and say, what are those rules for HR? Well, why do we have to do it that way, So that's been very, very exciting. But yes, my background is 15 years plus in HR in the for-profit space. And so that looks so much different from what we do and where we've gotten to. And it's been very exciting to come from that world and think that was the way that I had to do things in HR. But you've given me the freedom to free that up a little bit and really make the employee experience something that we is one of the highest things that we value in the company. So I think the extraordinary value, it just encompasses everything that we do right now for our culture and everything that we've put together in the last 3.5 years. It's been really exciting to do that.
Yeah. And, I love what you said about we look at things and go, but we don't have to do it that way.
Right,
and all of a sudden it's, there are all of these things that are considered, this is the norm, this is the standard, this is how things are done.
Right.
And really being disruptive of that.
Yes.
And saying, well, but why is it that way?
Right.
And should it be that way? And are there things we can do differently? So I'd love if you could share a little bit about what that's looked like, and what are some of the policies that we've been able to do that you might not have been able to otherwise?
Yes. So I have always been passionate about HR. That's, I think, why I'm such a good fit for it. But I always looked at HR in a different way. And when I was, an employee of a for-profit place, HR was always scary and terrifying. And if you met with them, you were probably 1 foot out the door or, something like that. So to use an example from that, a performance improvement plan is something that is very normal in a lot of companies in the HR world in particularly. And so we looked at each other that one day and said, do we have to do that? Why? Because it sounds like something that's so scary to an employee to get on. So just as an example there, we changed that word to be a support plan. And we found it to be so much more effective. It really helps somebody feel actually supported, as opposed to, here's what we'd like you to do in the next 30 to 90 days, and then you're out the door. So, changing things like that, even if it's like a small change, changing verbal documentation to a verbal conversation, using softer language, of course, always keeping the high standard of compliance and legality with HR as we have to, but it doesn't have to be scary and terrifying.
Yeah.
So, did I answer that? I think I talked around in it.
You did. You absolutely did. And I think that's, again, when we talk about culture of caring, it's let's actually support our employees, right?
Yes.
And as opposed to having an adversarial relationship, right?
Yes.
Where the company and you've got to do what we say, it's
Right.
really saying like, hey, we want you to succeed.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about, we also are really committed to giving people the tools to succeed.
Yes.
And so as we're kind of developing some of our developing our development programs, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
If you'd share a
Yes.
little bit about kind of what we're doing to help our employees build their skills because
Yes.
we actually want them to succeed.
Yes, so this is very exciting to me. I love that when I first started with you, we talked about what would the hiring philosophy be, and we landed on a conclusion of we wanted it to also improve the employee's life. And so how could we do that? And so I think we critically looked at the employee experience, and I think we've done a really good job of giving the tools that people need to succeed. Like you're talking about right now, we're really digging into a leadership development training, a professionalism training. A lot of our folks that come to us, we always joke that they come from past work trauma, as I did, as many did. And so you come into our space and you're like, you almost don't believe that the support is there. But to hire these people with wonderful hearts, great spirits, such a great company culture fit, we can fill in the other areas. We can provide the tools to succeed and learn a task or learn a skill. We can't teach somebody to have a wonderful heart. Yeah. And so some of the tools we put in place, well, those are the ones coming, the leadership, professionalism. Yeah. But our company in-services that we do each year, and we always try to make them so much, or so that they're not repetitive, yeah, and that they build on each other. So I think giving the tools to our people to succeed is just integral to our growth and success, because it does cost. I hope this metric is correct, but I looked at $20,000 to $30,000 a year for turnover costs, and employee retention is just something that's so important. And then also, you want to invest in your people and give them the tools because you handpicked them. You go through that interview process and you really do fall in love with the people that, have the great qualifications, the skills, the set. And so, investing in them just seems like a natural progression. Yeah.
And I think something that you've brought to us is really interviewing first for passion and for are they going to succeed at the company? Yeah. So do you want to share a little bit about how we've revamped our job postings? Because that's a cool thing that I think, one of the goals of this podcast is to share with other people some ideas about how do you do things differently and what could that look like? And so I think, it was as we started talking about diversity and inclusion and wanting a variety of backgrounds. And we kind of put in this new job description, and I'd love for you to share about it.
It was really exciting to me when we did that because we were looking at Indeed and looking at other job descriptions, and they all just felt, and not a knock on any other company, but to me, for what we are looking for is that warmth. And so when I was reading those job descriptions, they were very cold, detailed. Yes, they gave you what the job would entail, but you didn't really know who that company was or where they were coming from. And so when we redid our job descriptions, I think we have not only attracted better people, but we've been very transparent about who we are. And I think that's such a good fit when people come in, they automatically know kind of a little bit about us, where we're going, what our thoughts are. And so when we revamped the job description, it was a very exciting day for me because I'm a big HR nerd. And so that was wonderful when we did that.
Yeah, and something that, we very explicitly state in the top paragraph is we understand that higher education is not available to everyone.
Yes.
And so while this is a suggested level of education, we also will value your life experiences as that.
Yes.
And I think that we've really been successful. And, obviously we work in childcare, which is a field that right now it's really hard to recruit. You can't find people. The retention rates are terrible. Awful. And and we haven't, people ask all the time, like, are you having so much trouble finding people? And we're not.
No.
And I think part of it has to do with that upfront on the job, we're willing to just take a chance on people and look at their potential versus necessarily, okay, what what degrees do they have, what, work experience do they have, but really valuing who they are. And I think, a great example is, we've had employees that have come to us and maybe their only experience was as a manager at a fast food chain.
Yes.
And going, well, that's not technically what would normally be this, but I remember you coming to me and saying, okay, this person is so phenomenal. And if you've been able to stay a manager at a fast food chain for 3 years, then what kind of dedication and talent do you have? And I remember just being so impressed by that and being like, yes. And now we love her and she's fabulous. And really finding these treasures. And as I talked about when I had Tabitha on, is that, and we've talked a lot about this, is the unicorns.
Unicorns, yes.
Is we put out job descriptions that people think there is no way you're going to find someone that can do that and also be passionate.
Right.
And we do. We're in the business of finding unicorns.
Yes, we have been very lucky with that. And I think it's really that we've kind of narrowed our focus down to finding people that have an aptitude to learn. And if you have that and you have that heart, then we're a great fit.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we have started doing, and that whenever I share this with any of my leadership circles or other CEOs that I know, they're like, that's the most brilliant idea, and why didn't anybody think of this before? But the idea of a stay interview. And if you could share kind of what that is and how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of my favorite times of the year. So I conduct stay interviews twice a year. And I remember when we first started talking about this, it was because we were looking critically at our exit interview. And we were looking at those questions. And I was sitting there at home and I was reviewing them and I was like, I don't want to ask these questions when people are out the door. I want to know these issues and concerns and suggestions way before that. And so now I get that opportunity to do that. And we do the stay interviews twice a year. We get to ask the same set of questions in each session, and people really open up and not only talk about like getting to know your people better and hearing them, letting them feel very valued, but then you can also identify the people that are ready for growth. That's so exciting. And I know we're big on internal promotions, and it's really fun to sit in there and be like, see that person get so excited about their future with us.
And then if there is a problem, to be able to address it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that, and again, when we talk about past work trauma, I think a lot of people are very hesitant to bring up issues or say, I can't do my job because I don't have this.
Right.
And having the twice a year stay interviews means that they have that one-on-one chance with a senior executive to go, if I had a little extra help, I could do this job so much better. And I think that also speaks to our retention rate and why we're able to keep people. And so I know I've shared this on the podcast before, but if you just talk a little bit about retention, about how our employees like to stick around with us.
Yeah, I like to brag about it all the time on our retention rate, but I really do truly feel that it's because we know our people and we listen to them. A good example of a stay interview, follow through was that an employee hadn't mentioned that they, per their work, is very computer oriented. They needed a second monitor. Well, we did not know that. And in the stay interview, I said, what would make your job easier? What tools could we give you? And so that was what she requested. And with that, she's been able to double her productivity and was so thankful that we heard her and we did that. So it's little things like that. Even somebody asking for, an iPad. Could we have an extra iPad to do this? It just makes their life easier. And I think the fact that we hear them, I think we also have multiple touch points throughout the year so that we have the stay interviews, but we have, conversations with our managers one-on-one each month so that you can feel heard and talk about what you need. And the goal of those is that hopefully when you get to your performance review at the end of the year, that's not the first time you've sat down and spoken with your supervisor and got some one-on-one time with them. So, it's a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to just brag on Laura and on these methods that work is so since November of 2020, which is a crazy time that we opened a child care center and hired a ton of new employees, and we've continued to add employees. So we're now up to 29?
36, but
30, oh my gosh.
That's with our subs, so.
Okay, 36 including subs. But since that time, since November of 2020, we've only had 2 employees leave us, and one was because she had gotten a degree and got her dream job as a phlebotomist.
Yes.
So we were thrilled to let her go on to her dream job.
Yeah.
And then the other was because she had twins
Yes.
and decided to stay at home for a little while, which Lord knows I understand.
Yes.
So, it's that piece of going, when you listen, and if you listen to your employees and you surround them in a culture of care, and you prove that you actually do care about them, and it's not just, they're not a cog in a wheel, they're not replaceable. And I think unfortunately a lot of companies, especially as they get larger, start to be like, well, if that person quits, we can just plug somebody else in there.
Right.
But what you're talking about, that $20,000 to $30,000 that you lose when you lose an employee, that's it's not only do you lose that financially, you lose that institutional knowledge, and then you lose that team dynamic
That's
that
what
you
I was going to say. I think that's almost the most important part of that, is that when you're surrounded by employees that you care about, and then they start to leave, it makes you second guess what you're doing as well. And so, we haven't had anybody do that.
It's very exciting.
It's
It's one of my favorite things to brag on. But I think that one of the other reasons that this has all grown so well is I think that you are a lot to credit for it, and just your general positivity and good energy, and wanting to advocate for the employees. Yeah. And I think another great example of that is how recently we started talking about, well, how do you have disciplinary conversations?
Right.
And the typical way to do that is you blindside an employee, you bring them in, you ask them, it can be very rough, it's awkward. A lot of times they shut down or they break down.
Very aggressive.
Yes. And so if you would talk a little bit about, what you kind of brought and said, hey, maybe we could do this differently.
Yeah, and that all stems from, unfortunately, I, had some bad work experiences, and I just didn't want anybody to ever have to go through that again. It shouldn't be terrifying to talk to your supervisor. It's impossible to say there will never be an issue. So it's going to happen, right? So I think the way I view it is, don't blindside your employees. Don't make them feel so uncomfortable that they shut down, or there's tears and they can't express themselves. So I love what we've started doing is letting people know the day prior or, a week prior, just letting them be, or letting us be transparent in the way that we're going to speak to them. And then when we actually do meet, to have a truly engaging, active listening type of conversation where you're really hearing what they're saying. You're not stopping and waiting to speak. You're really listening to what they're telling you. Lots of times, a corrective action or a disciplinary conversation is all about miscommunication. And lots of times the expectations haven't been set for that employee, or there's some disconnect there. And that can easily be resolved in a really positive way. It doesn't have to be an aggressive corrective, I hate that term, corrective action, anyways.
And it's so negative, and it's looked at, as you mentioned, there are going to be issues. There's never a company that has no issues.
Right.
But I think it's, what I think is vital is coming to it with assuming everyone has best intent.
Yes.
Rather than assuming that this employee did this because they're just awful and they, instead going, why did this happen?
Right.
And giving them a chance to say, that heads up to say, hey, we're going to have a discussion about this incident that happened. Right. And so just letting you know, so they have time to think. They don't get that, super anxious when you feel like you're being attacked, right? It's instead you're saying, hey, let's have a conversation about this and let's make it an actual conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been pretty great.
We've seen good results with that, I think, so far, just where I feel like our employees feel like they're heard and that they're able to say, to give and provide real reasons as to why something occurred, as opposed to just being so upset, they're like, okay, and then they just leave. And then internally, they're like, I'm 1 foot out the door.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think some things, talking about saying, okay, well, why do we have to do it, or can we do something different? And I think we've come up with some policies that I've not seen anywhere else. And so one of those is, in our bereavement policy, we specifically put in a leave of absence for miscarriage or death of a child.
Yes.
And part of that is because I went through that and hid it from my work because I was like, oh, if they know I'm trying to get pregnant and I was showing up to work every day while I was having a miscarriage and having to hide that and know that I couldn't just tell them. And so just being upfront of we're a company that's almost all women and our one man.
Or one man.
And going, hey, let's be mindful of the kinds of issues that our employees might deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine having to go through that silently and not being able to share that. Another policy, I mean, there's so many, so it's hard to pinpoint, but another one that really benefited me and I, will benefit other women in our company moving forward is our lactation accommodation, which we actually have a designation from the Texas Mothers Workforce Commission. And we are accredited for that, with that designation because we provide a lactation space at our place of work. And so I know for me that was huge when I had my first baby, or my second, actually not Harper, with Vivian. And so, came to work, had her there at the center, and then able also to, provide her the nourishment that she needed and throughout the day.
Well, and I think that's also vital is that because we've got a childcare center, we are able to let our employees bring their babies with them.
Yes.
And so, we have a couple of pregnant employees right now and talking to them and saying, they would probably be some of those women that were forced to leave the workforce if they didn't have a childcare available to them, but being able to say, nope, bring your baby with you and we'd love to have them. And what that also creates is even more of a community amongst our employees, because it's like Vivi, your daughter, has grown up around everybody at the company, and so it's like there are two little girls, Vivi and Leah, that are employee kids that are like best of friends, and it creates this beautiful community. And again, as I advocate for employers trying to help with childcare as much as possible. Right. But another reason that is so important is because people aren't going to leave if their kids are happy in childcare at their work. I mean, that is, if you are an employer that is able to in any way provide childcare support to your employees, the amount of loyalty that carries is just pretty amazing.
It's huge. It's an invaluable benefit that I think we offer, and there's so much. I think extraordinary encapsulates so many things because the culture of caring is absolutely something that is so huge. And a part of that for us, I think, too, is our benefits package that we offer. And that, we looked at childcare and we were like, this work group in particular does not usually get these benefits. And so that's huge to me, the day that we were able to offer full benefits to our team and give them those options. And then also, something when we touched on pregnancy leave, which is now called parental leave and is for all employees and is inclusive. Thank you. So with that, oh goodness, rats.
Did you just lose it?
I lost it right out the door.
Lord knows that is like all the time. I'll be like, I'm talking, and I don't know what I'm talking about
where
anymore.
that went. Parental leave. Sorry, I caught it.
Yay!
It leads me to talk about short-term and long-term disability options. And what we provide for our team. And so every employee, has access to. All of our full-time employees have access to our short-term and long-term benefits. And so anyone going on pregnancy leave, that is an invaluable piece for them to have.
Well, and that was one thing, even before we could provide full benefits, we have always we as the company pay 100% of short-term and long-term disability. And this was something I got from another company I worked for because unfortunately, especially our younger employees, they might not think they need that. But if something happens and they've chosen they didn't want that extra $15 a paycheck or whatever it is, then they're in a really hard situation. And we deal with health issues, right? We do not want to have our employees not able to take care of their own health because they didn't have that. And so that's another piece. Well, Laura, as we kind of wrap up, one of the things we like to talk about is our failed so hard, right?
Yes.
And I'd love just for you to first of all say, talk a little bit about what that was like when we first brought that in.
My goodness, sure.
And then if you want, share one of your failed so hard.
Sure, one of the many that I can pull from. Yes, I remember when you first rolled that out, and it was uncomfortable, right? I think the team even felt it of like, you're sure, Natalie? Like, I can tell you I made a mistake, and I'm supposed to be okay with that, right? And I remember in that first couple meetings, it was a little bit, you were like so encouraging. You're like, here's mine, with all this confidence. And so I think it really laid the groundwork for us to become that. And now it is that way. Now we're like, okay, look at this failed so hard as a productive failure for sure. What have I learned from it? What can I change? Oh my goodness. And to think of a failed so hard, here's just a simple one, but you schedule a meeting and you don't title it correctly and you don't know where you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. I have definitely done that. I know other colleagues that have done that as well.
And this is funny because this was actually my failed so hard this week. I was on the way into the office and I had like a series of meetings set up. And I called Laura and I was like, Laura, I have on my calendar webinar speaking. Yes. What webinar am I speaking at? I thought I had a webinar I was supposed to be speaking at. I had no additional context. I was like, start asking around the office,
right.
Find out if anybody has any idea what webinar I'm supposed to be speaking at. And then as we got into it, I recognized that it was actually a webinar about speaking that I had signed up to go to. And I was like, okay, that's much better, because I was really worried that I was supposed to be speaking at something and I had no idea what it was going to be in 10 minutes. So, yeah.
Well, that's very similar to what mine was as well.
So it's one of those things that we all have those issues, and then what a great opportunity to again build community.
Yes.
Right? Is normalize it, and let's create this culture of caring by supporting people in success and failure.
Yes, both.
Yes.
I love that. Yes.
So as we wrap up, Laura, is there anything else you want to say about extraordinary and what that value means to you, or how you've seen it play out in our organization?
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite values. When you first start kind of talking about this word and what would it be, you had joked that it would be jazz hands, and that made me so excited for a multitude of reasons. But it really does. It's the extra mile that we go for our employees, and in our work, so it's not only just the employee experience, it's what we do as well. It's in our mission. It's all of this together.
Well, that's a great point, is that, we talk about how we do extra for our families is we don't just provide the childcare, we also surround them with support. We connect them to other resources. Right. And then even at the childcare center is, we say it's not a typical childcare center. These babies that are being dropped off are in trauma situations. So we do things, we're not going to let them cry it out. Right. Because that's not what they need at that moment. Right. I love that our chief of childcare operations, Catherine, she basically has a motto where if it's not nailed down, if a child bonds to it, they get sent home with that item. We can get another one donated. We can find it somewhere else. Yeah. But we want to make sure that we're just doing that little extra above and beyond for our families and for our staff. Well, Laura, it has been so much fun to talk with you. Not that I don't 40 times a day, every day. But thank you for coming on today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please, as always, if you have any ideas or want to share your failed so hards, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot.
Culture of Caring with Natalie Boyle is brought to you by Mommies In Need, a nonprofit organization with the mission of caring for kids so that families can access health care. The podcast is hosted by Natalie Boyle, produced by Tabitha Evans and Real News Communications Network. If you have an idea for a topic or guest, or want to share a #FailedSoHard moment, email us at coc@mommiesinneed.org. Please remember to rate, like, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Video versions of the podcast are available on YouTube.